Welcome to Excel Magic Trick number 1470. Hey, in this video, we're going to follow up on last video and see how to add daily rainfall from 5 a.m. to 5 a.m. the next day. But in this video, we're going to use Power Query, also known as Get and Transform. Now, last video, we used a helper column and a pivot table. This video, we use Power Query. Next video, we'll see an array formula. But Power Query, Get and Transform, we are going to see all sorts of amazing tricks. Our rainfall data is going to come in text form. So each month we get a different text file. We'll use Power Query from folder. We'll import it into a proper data set. Then we'll see how to use a parameter from Excel, which will be our number of hours, to shift the start of the day. We'll see how to create that parameter, use it in Power Query. We'll see how to do things like create a custom column, group by, and even create our finished pivot table report using Power Query. Now, the reason that we will use Power Query as opposed to the helper column and pivot table last video or array formulas next video is that for us, we're getting this data externally. So it makes sense, since it's a complicated import, to simply use Power Query to import it, create our finished report, dump it into our Excel spreadsheet. Then when we get new data, we simply refresh in Excel, and instantly our report updates. The pivot table and helper column, if you really have your data already in Excel, that is the easiest way. And as we'll see next video, array formulas or formulas in general, the advantage is that once you change the parameter, everything instantly updates without refreshing. All right, our first step is to go look at our data. Now, you have to download below the video. There's a link for the Excel files and this folder. 1470 text data files. It will come zipped, and you'll have to unzip it. And then inside, there's two folders, Add Later and Start. I'm going to double-click Start. And there are our three text files that we will use initially to import. Then later, we'll add those later month text files to this Start folder, and then we'll just have to refresh in Excel. Now, let's go back over to our Excel workbook. Now, back over here in Excel, I'm on the 1470 sheet. Here's our parameter, hours required. In last video, we built this list and we built this data validation. So we can simply select 10 or whichever number of hours we need to shift the start of the day. When I have 5 here, that means the day starts at 5 a.m. and goes all the way into the next day at 5 a.m. So all of those times, even when it's 4 a.m. on 8/2, will count for 8/1 totals. Now, because time is not integer, but the proportion of a 24-hour day, we have to take our 5, equal sign, left arrow, and divide it by 24 hours. That will give us, as a decimal, the proportion of a 24-hour day. And that's the time value we need to use when we're dealing with time. Now, I've already converted this to an Excel table by going up to Insert, Table, or using Control-T. And very importantly, Design, over to Properties, and I named it Hours. Now, I need to import this. This will be our first step. Even before we go get our text data, I need to import and get just that number into Power Query so I can use it in a formula. So with a single cell selected, Data Ribbon tab, Get and Transform. I'm in the latest version, Office 365, Excel 2016, so my Get and Transform is on the left. If you have a non-Office 365 version of Excel 2016, your Get and Transform is on the right. If you have Excel 2010 or 13, you have to download a special tab for Power Query. All right, I have a single cell selected, Get and Transform. To import it into Power Query, I have to use From Table. There's the two-column table. There's the name. I'm going to use that name. I want to use the red delete I do not need to change the type, so I'm going to delete that. I have a single step. Now watch this. To convert this whole table to that single number, I'm going to click in that one cell, right-click, drill down, and instantly there it is. It's showing just as a number. So this query is named hours. Because it's a single number, I can use this name hours in formulas later on, and it will totally be that time equivalent for our start of the day shift. Now I want to go to Home, Close and Load To, and I want to make sure, and I'm in Office 365, so I see Import Data. If you're in an earlier version, you'll see Load To. In either version, select Only Create a Connection, click OK. Now in my queries and connections, by the way, I have Office 365, so that's what it says. In earlier versions, I can't remember what it says, something like show queries. But there it is. We can use that later. Now we have to go back up to Data, Get and Transform, Get Data, drop down, From File, From Folder. And we have to navigate using Browse. I downloaded mine to the desktop. I need to open this. Do not point it to 1470. If you do, it will get all the files inside both folders. We need to point towards Start. We're telling Power Query, please get all of the files in that Start folder. Click OK. Now we can click OK. Now we want to click Edit, not Combine or Load. I want to click Edit. Now, of course, since we pointed it towards a folder, it brings in attributes about the files in that folder. We can see that .txt is listed here. Hey, but look at this. Sometimes people will give you text extensions capitalized or lowercase. Now, the thing about Power Query is Power Query is case sensitive. So because I want to filter this column to only allow .txt files, I first want to right-click, go down to Transform, and point to lowercase. So one of the steps over here in Applied Steps is now please make everything lowercase. Now when I come up, click the drop-down, go to Text Filters, and say please only import extensions that equal .txt, all lowercase. Everything will work. We made sure that everything coming in the previous step was lowercase. Now I click OK. There's our steps. Let's name this. This is not a good name. I'm going to backspace, backspace. I called it something like Rainfall Finished Report because eventually this will be the finished report. This is the name of the query, and it's the name of the Excel table, which for us will be our report that's dumped back into Excel. Enter. Now our next step, and we can look. Do not click on the green binary, but click in the white, and you can see, oh, yeah, there's a file. There's a file. So each one of these is a file, and we need to extract all the data and combine them or append them into a single table. Now this double downward pointing arrow, when I click this on the content column, it'll do two things. It'll ask us for delimiter, and then it will build a custom function for us. So I'm going to click the double downward pointing arrow. It's going to ask us, hey, is it OK to use the first file as an example to build the function which will extract the data from each individual file? There's the file origin. Delimiter, we definitely want to say because our data is tab delimited. That means each column is separated by a tab. Actually, you can see that it misinterpreted it over here. It thinks there's 1, 2, 3 different fields. Now when I say please use tab as the delimiter, it properly gets 2 columns only. The tab just separated the 2 fields, so there was a tab there. And for each record, there was a tab in between time, stamp, and rain total. It based it on the first 200 rows. That's OK. Now, when I click OK here, it'll actually take a second. It's building a custom function. And let's take a look so we understand what's going on over here. There is the sample file it used to build the function. There's the code. you can actually go look at the code, although you don't need to. View, over to Advanced Editor. It took as its source CSV.document. That's the function that allows you to go from a text file into some table, and it promoted the headers. Internally wrote this code, but now it needs to use this code, in particular the promote headers, on each individual file. Cancel. So now internally it builds a custom function. You can tell it's a function because it says f of x. If you go look at the Advanced Editor, this is warning you. It says don't change the code here. If you're going to change the code, which this video has nothing to do with that, you have to go back to the previous step and do it. I'm going to click OK. The only difference here is it defined as its source a variable. The variable always comes in parentheses. Then there's an equal sign and a greater than that defines that as a variable. And we can see the CSV.document. There's the variable name, which it just defined right there. This allows Power Query to put each individual file in our list of text files there, import it with those details there, and promoting the headers. Done. You don't really need to know any of that. It does it all automatically. Now, there's our hours, but look, here's our second query. So if I look right here, it has combined the two columns and all of the text files. There's all the steps. Now, we need to convert this column. Actually, we're going to remove this column, but we're going to use this column right here with the date and time, but we're going to subtract whatever the parameter number of hours are to push all dates back so that when we add rain total, we'll get the correct rain total numbers for each date. So for example, all of these 8 ones, because the day starts at 5 a.m., all of 4:30 and previous should really be 7:31. So no problem. We can do that. Now, we want to add that hour, but that's a decimal. In Power Query, we have to deal with data types. There's a decimal, and this is a date time. And we cannot directly subtract the two numbers. Now, there's a bunch of ways we can do this, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the data type to decimal number. Now, it's going to ask me if I want to add a new step. I do want to add a new step right there. Now, this is in the same data type as our hour. So we can simply add a custom column, go up to Add Column, Custom Column. I'm going to call this simply Date, because in our final report, I want that as the column header. Now, here's our formula. I'm going to double-click Date Stamp. That is the name of this column right here. So as the helper column, or in Power Query, they call them custom column, is copied down, it'll get each one of those decimals. And I want to subtract, and now I simply type hours. That's the name of that entire query, which happens to be a single number. Now, when I click OK, there is exactly what I want. And I'm going to change the data type to date. I don't really care for my label in the final report, whether there's a time there. So I click date, and just like that, I've converted this. Now I want to remove this column, and I simultaneously want to move the date column before the rain total, because in the final report, that's the order I want. So watch this. This is so cool in Power Query. If I select this column first, then hold Shift or Control, because we only have another column, and click. Now when I right-click Remove Other Columns, because I selected Date first, when I click on Remove Other Columns, that will be the first column listed. Now we can build our pivot table report. Now think about what a pivot table does in Excel. If I were to drag date down to the rows, I would have a unique list listing 1, 731, 181, and so on. Well, in SQL and Power Query and other database languages, the term we use is group by. If I say group by this column and define the calculation as adding on this column, it'll look just like our pivot table report. So with date selected, You can go up to Transform, Group By, Home, Group By, or right-click Group By. There's the date. Our name of the new column, I want rainfall total. The operation is going to be to sum, and the column I want to sum is rain total unit. Actually, I got this data set from a scientist, and it wasn't indicated the unit, so I don't know what that unit is. So I added this question mark because we're supposed to always be very clear in reporting and in our data analysis to say what the unit is. All right, I'm going to click OK, and that is absolutely beautiful. Now remember, that date column right there is connected to a number in Excel. So when I change the number 5 hours to 12 hours or 11 or 23, this column will change and the totals will change. All right, now we're ready. We have the right data type, date and decimal. We're ready to dump this back into Excel as our finished report. There's the name. There's the steps. Let's go up to Close and Load 2. I want to put this as a table. I want to use it on the existing sheet. I have no idea why that is not working. So I'm going to have to trick it. I'm going to put it on a new sheet and then cut and paste and put it on the correct sheet here. When I click OK, there is the final report. I'm going to Control asterisk to highlight the whole table, Control X to cut, come back to 1470. I think I'm going to try and select A6, Control V. Now, here's the moment of truth. That's Power Query. It's connected to that external folder. I'm going to come here and type 10, Enter. Remember, formulas update instantly, but pivot tables and Power Query do not. But no problem. We have a data. We can click Refresh All. We could right-click the table, refresh. We could even use, if we want Refresh All, that refreshes all the connections in the workbook. Control-Alt-F5. And just like that, we have our adjusted totals. Now, here's the beauty of Power Query. Let's go add those new files. Here's our top folder, 1470. There's our Start folder. Power Query is pointed towards that folder. Let's double-click Add Later. And I actually added some Excel files because I want to dump all of these in to the Start folder. Click the first, hold Shift, click on the last, Control-C. Go back to the top folder, double-click Start, Control-V to paste. Now, I added these Excel files, and I intentionally capitalized some of the TXT extensions just to show you that our filter that we created over in Power Query will prevent those Excel files from coming in and will properly import .txt regardless of whether it's capitalized or not. Let's go back over to Excel. And if we look over here in the Queries pane, 93 rows, we can refresh, right-click Refresh, and look at that. Now we have 154 rows over here. Control down arrow. That is totally amazing all the way to December 31st. Control Home. Now we can simply come up here, use our drop down. And let's say we don't want to shift it at all. I'm going to put a 0 right here. Right-click Refresh. And just like that, look at that. 8-1. We don't have any 731. Dates are adjusted. Rainfall totals are adjusted. Now, one last thing. Remember, we just refreshed. And over here in the query pane, we can see 153 rows. And I want to open this and look. Now, when I double-click, it brings it into edit mode, and we can actually edit this query. But what we want to look at is going back through the steps. I can click on Step 1 Source. And there's all of the files now from the Start folder. Now, if you don't see this view here, click Refresh Preview. Now, another important thing about Source and using From Folder, if that folder path changes, simply come over to this gear icon and click to open, and you can change the folder path by clicking Browse. All right, I'm going to click Cancel. We can click through the steps. This is lowercase. You can see right here, lowercase. No problem, all lowercase. I do not want to delete step. I don't know what I click. Oh, I clicked the red X. Now I'm very carefully going to not click on the red X. Filtered rows, and there we get rid of our Excel files. All right, let's close this. All right, in this video, we saw how to create a parameter in Excel, bring it into Power Query so we can use it. We saw how to use get data from folder inside of Power Query. We saw custom column and group by. And we saw that our output rainfall total report will update when we have new files. Now, if you like this video, be sure to click that thumbs up, leave a comment, and sub, because there's always lots more videos to come from Excel is Fun, including our next video, same topic, but we'll solve it using array formulas. All right, we'll see you next video.